Eli Campbell here. One thing that makes Steamboat special is how many awe-inspiring people call our valley home. You could find yourself in line at the coffee shop next to an Olympian, or sitting on the gondola next to the founder of a world-renowned business. Our community produces and attracts the best of the best in their respective fields, but most are so humble about it you would never know. These extraordinary people are the common folk in the boat. Welcome to Common Folk in the Boat. I'm Eli Campbell. Dave Whitlinger from Billo Premium Cannabis sitting next to me. How's it going, sir?
I'm great.
Yeah?
I had to think about that for a second.
You did have to think. I mean, it's
I don't know why.
It's November. It's that time of year, I think. I don't know. Like, it's a little bit more gray. There is some snow. Some people are getting out and playing in it, but not quite enough.
Synapses just aren't firing as quickly.
I think we're all just kind of waiting for Thanksgiving and the ski area to open up. But we're going to have a conversation today that's going to get us thinking a lot. We're going to be talking to Eugene Buchanan, author, speaker, adventurer. He's actually, do you know he's part of the New York's Explorers Club?
I did know that.
Yeah.
So I've known Eugene for a long time. And first of all, I know that he's a great storyteller. So I don't know how long this episode's going to end up being, but it could be a long one. Anyhow, yes, he presented at our Rotary Club meeting years ago, and come to find out, and I forget the statistic, but there's only you have to do some pretty interesting, hard things to even be accepted into this
it's not one of those
Explorers Club or
it's not one of those deals where you get this thing in the mail that's like, ooh, send us $35 and we'll give you a plaque. Like,
it's not the who's who where it's a pay to play.
Yeah.
No, you have to actually be an explorer, and you have to have credited for certain things. And so how interesting that he's here in Steamboat and going to be on the show.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking to him. I'm also looking forward to Friday night, tomorrow night. We're going to be partying it up at the Old Town Pub with the cycles.
I know. It kind of goes without saying what we're high on over at Billo. I mean, everything I've been working on this week has been sort of focused on tomorrow's party, and that we're gonna basically get the community together for a big old bash at the Old Town Pub. And thank you, Steamboat locals, for being part of it, because I think it really is going to be a fun time. We sort of set out to just do something unique and interesting and again, celebratory. But as it's sort of shaping up and as people are kind of RSVPing and letting us know they're going to come, I get more of a feeling that it is turning more into like a community party. And I don't mean to be overly, sentimental about that, but it is the right time of year. It's quiet. It's a great time for locals to just get together, let our hair down. So Billo is over the moon happy that we were able to make it work with Old Town Pub. We've brought in the band, so there's no cover charge. There's no what's in it for me kind of thing. Like, this is literally just an open party for anyone to come out, and I think that's so fun to be a part of.
Yeah, I remember when you were first talking about this with me, you think at that point it was even just an idea stage, and you said, what do you think, a party November 15th, is that a good time of year or bad time of year? I said, that is a perfect time of year, kind of like we were just talking about. Like, takes us a while to even think, I'm good. Like, we need something to really get excited about. And of course, Billo's going to bring that excitement. And shameless cross promotion, I had the opportunity to interview Patrick Harvey of Cycles Band on the Steamboat Soundcheck. So check that out. It was a great little chat with him, and he got to talk about how much playing in Steamboat means to him and how much he enjoys playing at the pub. So should be a really great night. And for anyone that's listening after Friday, November 15th,
right? Yeah.
This isn't going to be the last time
this
that you
is an
guys...
evergreen show. Let's remember it.
Yeah, but I'm sure this isn't the last time that you guys are going to be throwing big parties like this.
I'm not going to say anything specific, Eli, but I'd say this is probably first of many.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling this will be just a good time, and
to make sure you're on that guest list in the future, go to mybillo.com, sign up for the email blast, and know how to get registered next time. So little plug for the sponsor.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Sometimes I give you a hard time, but this time I'll throw you a little bone. So. All right. Well, it is time. Like you said, I think this might be a long episode, but in all the right ways. We're going to get some great stories. We're going to bring Eugene Buchanan to the couch here and talk a lot about some adventures and how Steamboat has influenced him throughout all of his career. Welcome back to Common Folk in the Boat. I'm happy to be joined by Eugene Buchanan. How are you doing, sir?
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh, man, I am excited. I was trying to think. I don't know how long I've known you. I met you, many, many years ago when I was first in town. You've been in town since the early 90s. You were originally in Boulder working as a journalist for the Denver Business Journal before you came up here. What was that like for you? Is that kind of where you thought your career was headed? Was kind of that business journal, true journalistic?
Eugene, the businessman.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a good question. I majored in business econ at Colorado College. Grew up in Boulder. Went to Colorado College. Started raft guiding during my summers. And then went up to Alaska, managing this rafting company right out of college. And was going to stay up there for the winter after and then keep that job the next year. But then a buddy got a permit to run the Grand. He needed help doing that, and it was in November, so I came back down to help him do that. Then ended up moving to Telluride right after that trip because that was kind of down in that neck of the woods. And then stumbled into a job there at the newspaper, as a sports editor at the Telluride Times at the time. So kind of got into writing then. I kind of got into writing, my last year of college a little bit, wrote a couple papers for classes, that would get read out loud and stuff. And then, ended up working for the paper in Telluride. Then I started freelancing for some of the ski and powder mag and stuff because they saw some of my stuff in there. So then I was kind of weighing. I was going to go back to grad school, for an MBA. I got into Thunderbird down in Arizona. But at the same time, I was kind of writing more and more and liking that. So I deferred that. And then moved up and then moved back to Boulder from Telluride and got a job at the Denver Business Journal. So I was like, well, that kind of blends the two. Maybe I'll do that for a while, see what I like. And so I did that for, 2 or 3 years before, then after that, then I took a job for the booming World Pro Mogul Tour as a media director. So I kind of jumped to the PR side of things for a couple years. And then moved up here, got a job with, at the time, I was really kayaking quite a bit. That took over a lot of my life. Fell in love with that, started traveling for that. And this editor position opened up for this magazine called Paddler. So the owner at the time was based in Southern Cal. And so I ran it out of Boulder for 6 months or so. And then that's when my wife and I, who I met on that Grand trip, actually, I met my wife down on that. So that's when I was like, well, we could do a job like this up in the mountains, just as easily as here in Boulder if the guy doesn't need us out in California. So let's start looking for good mountain towns, river towns to live in. I needed a river town.
Yeah.
I couldn't move back to Telluride because that has the San Miguel. I would have loved to because I love Telluride. But it's just not a river town, of any merit.
Yeah.
It's like not enough water or anything like that. So we narrowed it down to either Durango, Steamboat, Jackson, or Bend. Those are kind of our four for staying in the West. And my family, my wife's twin was living in Boulder, so she liked to be close to there. I still had family down there. I needed to travel quite a bit. So Steamboat kind of won out because its proximity to Denver, the Yampa, the small town vibe, the skiing.
Yeah.
I was a ski patrol, throughout college and all that, and I've been skiing my whole life. So, but that was kind of secondary for us moving here. It wasn't really the skiing, especially coming from Telluride. Terrain-wise, I hate to say it, nothing against Telluride, and nothing against Steamboat, but, back then you're into coolars and all that kind of stuff. But, as I learned, as we all have since, Steamboat has the snow.
Yeah.
As you get older, that trumps all. So.
Well, and I've said it many times, a lot of people come here for the skiing, but it's not the most extreme skiing, especially before they opened Mahogany Ridge in that area. It was the community that really drew me here, and skiing was part of that community. But the ski area has certainly expanded some of that extreme access. And I want to get into the river side of things, but you said something that piqued my interest because I'm a former mogul skier, competitive mogul skier, and you were doing it back. You're there, kind of in that world back in the hot dog days, right? Like
Kick-ass blaster. Did you
Yeah.
ever see one of those?
Oh yeah, this was like after jet sticks and all that era, but kind of before, and it was kind of before inverts. So
Yeah.
I remember one of our contests, Shane McConkey, RIP, launched a naked backflip off one of the jumps after he got, he lost his duel or whatever. And
knowing him, was he literally naked?
Yeah, he was butt naked because he just poached the course and did it to kind of spite the judges.
Yeah.
I think that was in Vail. So, but it was, you know what, Jaylene Koff, who's from here, and the Olympian, and her mother Patty Koff and her dad, they're divorced now, but Scott Koff, they were both on the tour and tore it up, great. But this was Bobby Aldegary here in town, he was on it in those days.
My old coaches, Chuck Martin and Kristen
Chuck
Brown.
Martin, all those guys, and I ended up kind of like you, stumbled into a announcing job for it too. We were at an event in Killington, and the announcer couldn't make it for some storm coming from New York or something. And so I was like, well, heck, give me the mic, I'll do it. And so then, I did a decent enough job, so I kind of ended up announcing them from then on for a couple of years, as well as doing the media stuff. So I actually got to know a lot of the guys pretty well through that. Like you say those names, Chuck Martin and all those guys. It was a blast from the past. One of them, this guy named Cameron Boyle, just passed away. I just heard about a few months ago. So, and he was a total stud back then. But
so you were in the ski world, but it was the rivers that brought you to Steamboat. And rivers have always been important in this area. You had to look back at the River Fest that's gone on since the 1980s here. Tubing's been an annual tradition through the summers. But when you moved to town, what was the river scene like here in the Steamboat Springs area?
That's a real good question. So it was 92 when we moved up here. I got married in 91. I remember driving over Rabbit Ears. It was in May. It was kind of cloudy and foggy. You're coming through the clouds, and you come down. We didn't know any. I knew one person in town, Hans Barron, who now runs Gerber Barron Design. He was a CC buddy of mine, and just the valley opened up, green meadows everywhere because it was mid-May. We're just like, wow, here's home. Look at this beautiful, and it was a lot tinier back then, 30 years ago, right? So move in, and the river environment at the time, I had a cousin who lived here. My mom said, you got a cousin who lives up in Steamboat, and he's a World Cup, paddler. This guy named Steve Holmes, and he was on a World Cup Sea Tour, the 96 Olympic team. And so knew him, and then just kind of ingratiated myself to the local community. Barry Smith, who runs Mountain Sport Kayak School, ran into him right away because these guys are all like, hey, this guy who runs this Paddler magazine's moving to town and basing it here.
They were looking for free publicity.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and at the time, Wave Sport Kayaks was here. Chan Zwanzig had started that in Oak Creek, and that rapidly became a pretty big player in the whitewater kayaking world. At the time, there was probably 4 or 5 whitewater kayak companies in the country, and those guys were gobbling up market share. They kind of created the first team. And I kept wanting to, and I was really into kayaking at the time, and I kept wanting all these mogul skier guys to get into it. I was like, guys, you guys should do this in the off season. It's a blast. But Chan really kind of facilitated the team concept of having a traveling freestyle team going around in different events and that kind of thing. So I did it as a kind of one-man editorial show here for the first 4 years, just, tried it out of my house before remote working was even a thing. And I'd be in my bathrobe for 3 days straight, and friends from all over coming and crashing on our floors because I owed so many ski favors from my other end of the couch, And so then I ended up getting an office downtown because I was like, all right, I got to separate church and state here a little bit. And then, the magazine changed hands. I got an equity percentage, and it got bought by the American Canoe Association, which is based in Washington, D.C., and so then they were the other owner of it, as well as myself. We made this more of a publishing headquarters instead of just editorial. We brought design in-house, ad sales in-house, all that we had. And then we ended up moving into the little red house on Oak Street above Gamber.
Yeah.
And so we had the whole upstairs of that thing for probably 9 years or something like that. So it was a blast seeing Honey Stinger and Big Agnes kind of grow along at the same time we were. And we had a pretty vibrant paddling scene. And at the time also, you could almost do no wrong in the paddling world. And that was the age of magazines as well. The paddling industry was real similar to the climbing industry at the time. There's 2 big climbing magazines, Rock and Ice and Climbing. And there's 2 big paddling magazines at the time, each with similar market sizes and demographics. And one of my buddies was a publisher, the other one, so we'd bounce ideas off each other all the time. And it was the only place for people's ad dollars to go. You'd get ad buys from Patagonia, North Face, even these kind of businesses that were on the peripheral of paddling but wanted that market because they knew they were all campers and outdoors people and that sort of thing. So, and then, of course, there were, a couple of rafting outfitters here. A couple kayak schools. For a town like this to have 2 kayak schools, backdoor sports and mountain sports. But, the common denominator of all of them, while they're all based here, is the Yampa River, going right through town. And even to this day, it's hard to find a better place to learn how to kayak, to get your feet wet, so to speak, in the world of, supping or rafting or IKing. I mean, you look out here for 2 months during the year, it's as good as it gets. Yeah. And the Yampa's become, the first river trip I ever took was on the Yampa. And I was like 5th grade. Our parents took for me and 3 of my brothers and sisters down, 5-day trip on the Yampa. I still kind of remember that as being, pretty impressionable. And then here I am back on the banks of it. So
yeah, and of course the water's always been a part of your life. You went on from paddler to launch Paddling Life to writing books, and some of these books that you've brought here, they're incredible stories of either first descents down just amazing rivers, or just places that a lot of people wouldn't even think to travel and to try to raft. You have a story of basically making your own rafts and life jackets out of soccer balls and things like that. There's a spirit of adventure and resilience, and I think this town, there's a lot of that spirit, maybe not to that same level, but what is it you think about this town that brings so many like-minded people who just want to adventure and get the most out of life?
I think you hit it on the head earlier. It's, and I didn't really know about it before we moved here, but it's, the community. It really is. You get like-minded people that are outdoorsy, that, want this environment for the kids. And you get, we moved here because, I had like 2 key things of moving to a ski town, a wife and a job. So you can get by pretty well if you have each of those in a ski town. But then knowing that we were going to raise kids, and my values and stuff in life are like Steamboat embodied them all, of a place that I wanted to raise my kids. I got 2 girls, Brooke and Casey. They're both grown now and out of high school, but raised them both on the banks of the Yampa. Would pick them up from soccer practice in our raft and raft them home to the depot. Would take them out, just on the. I mean, it was just part of their lives, And I think there's so many people here that are like that, and it's awesome to see. Looking out now and seeing some of the younger crowd come through, and the same thing, even in our neighborhood, we live up in Fairview. Now you're seeing, people who can afford it, knock on wood, but come in with kids, and we got these neighbors across our street, and they got these 2 kids, and they just come waltzing across and, playing with our dog and in the snow and outdoors biking and doing everything that you want kids to be doing. Is a wholesome lifestyle,
When you wrote a book about that, outdoor parents, outdoor kids, and as a parent myself, I've always said, my kids, our kids, will never really appreciate what they have here growing up until they venture on and see that, the easy access to skiing or the river and the outdoors isn't available to everybody. But in this day and age of technology, it's even a little bit harder to get them to still get out and get outdoors. So can you talk a little bit about why you find it, what you found as the benefits, and why you find it so important to get your kids outside and learning through nature?
Yeah, well, I'm part of that. So that was my, that would have been my second book, was Outdoor Parents, Outdoor Kids. First one was Brothers on the Bashkaus. Right after I moved here, we won this grant from Gore-Tex to go do this river in Siberia. So we went up there and did this wacko thing called the Bashkaus River. Wrote a book on that. And then the second book I did, after I left the magazine and they moved it back to D.C. for a bit, I stayed here and had to kind of reinvent myself a little bit. And so I started dabbling in some books, freelance projects, whatnot. The second one is called Outdoor Parents, Outdoor Kids. And it's basically, I realized at the time how important it was to get kids outside and learn from nature. And right at the same time, there's an author, a PhD guy named Richard Louv, L-O-U-V, and he wrote a book called Last Child in the Woods, and he coined the phrase nature deficit disorder. And he recognized it back then that there's this big problem in our society today. I'm calling it nature deficit disorder, where kids just they're not getting outside enough. And if they are, they're not having enough unstructured free time. I mean, it's one thing to go outside and play soccer and here's your practice time, and then we're picking you up and shuttling you over to this. But to be just out in the woods building, or on a beach building sandcastles, building forts, damming up creeks, playing with bugs, unstructured free time. And the main competition to that is screen time, is right around the advent of iPhones. And, and every year you see that just getting worse and worse with kids. And the real thing is suffering is these kids' ability to get outside. It's not like other sports. It's not like other things. It's kind of the competition for that coveted free time. We know how precious time is. So, let your kids run outside unstructured and go make their own fun. That's what it's all about. Like, make a pile of leaves, play King of the Castle, whatever. Like all the stuff we did growing up.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, my mom had 6 kids in Boulder, and, we would just all be outside running around the flat. We grew up on the hill in Boulder, and we'd be running around outside the neighborhood, climbing the flatirons, whatever. We'd hear the dinner bell at like 9 o'clock clanking on the back steps. And we're like, all right, time to come home. And it's like, they didn't structure any of our time. We made our own fun. So
Yeah, I would just chime in and say I find it so interesting because I've had this conversation we all have for the last decade or more as we're parents now. And I'm saying the same thing. Like when I was a kid, when we were all kids, nobody had to tell us to go outside or tell us to do this. It was just what you did. You get your, school bell rings, you're out of school. Okay. You get your friends together and you're gone till literally the dinner bell rings. We had a similar situation. We had a big church bell that my parents would ring and I could hear it probably 4 blocks away, which included basically all my friends. So it didn't matter whose house I was at. I could hear the dinner bell, and it was like, okay, come out of the woods, stop building the fort or the leaf pile, whatever.
Right, and I think that we're all so lucky to be in Steamboat raising our kids here because you realize that you can do that here a lot easier than you can over. Front Range, downtown Denver. You're living in the suburbs there or something else. You're not being able to go escape to the river, to Emerald, to Spring Creek, to outdoor situations, let alone going on bigger stuff like, say, a backpack trip with your parents. And another thing that helps is having the mindset of people who live here kind of fosters that. Most people who come here to live they like the outdoors, and they like whether it's hunting or fishing or biking or running or backpacking or boating or whatever. They like a handful of those.
Yeah.
And they're gonna instill that in their kids. And they let their kids decide what they like, but
I think it speaks to the resilience factor that we were talking about a little bit too. If you play outdoors and you do kind of experience those things, you have to work through a cold spell or maybe a bloody finger from playing in the dirt or something like that. It's not like on a screen where you get endless lives and things. And so you have to work through that. And, I think it's, again, speaking of some of your books, you have these books of resilience and meeting the challenge. You have a book about rafting through Colca Canyon. I've actually been there.
Oh, you have? Oh, nice.
I was, my wife and I, after we got married, we spent 6 months traveling the world. And so we went there. It's the second deepest gorge, I believe, in the world.
Well, I go into that a little bit on the book. Some people call it, of course, the guy who took me down there, they swear it's, the deepest, canyon in the world. The other one vying for that honor is the Cotahuasi, which is like a couple valleys over.
Right.
And that breaks down into, okay, what's the difference between a canyon and a valley? Cotahuasi is a deeper valley, but Colca's tighter, so it's like, and everyone wants those bragging rights.
And the one thing it's interesting about Colca, I've been to the Grand Canyon before as well, and to hike down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and get back out, you can do it in a day, but that's a big hike. Colca, when I was there, we did that in a day, and it was a really kind of surreal experience for what we did. We started in this small town, Cabana Conde, and it's it's a little kind of impoverished area, and we hiked down and we got to a spa at the bottom of this canyon. The only way it's accessible is by hiking or by mule. There's swimming pools, lunch, and then we hiked right back out. And the most dangerous part of our experience was actually the bus ride to and from. It's the world's narrowest road, and the bus driver has an overpacked bus, and right as we were leaving town, he grabbed a 40 from somebody and started drinking it.
That's always like you.
Your experience a little different. You definitely had some other challenges there, but I'm kind of curious whether it's that trip or any of these adventures that you've been on. Have you had any of those experiences of really having to push through something of discomfort and near misses or anything like that you can speak to?
Yeah, well, I'll go into that one for a second. That's great that you've been down there, because where you hiked to was our intended takeout. So we were doing that stretch right above there.
Yeah.
As a little backstory, there's this guy, Jurek Mahershik. He's this Polish explorer. I met him back when I was working at the Business Journal in Denver. And I was, he knew I was a kayaker and working for this magazine called River Runner a little bit at the time. And they needed a kind of class 5 safety kayaker to go with them on a river trip to Ecuador, because he was assessing this river the Quijos, for its commercial feasibility. They wanted to see if, and so basically, these guys came over in the mid 80s, a group of river runners from Poland, broke through the Iron Curtain because it was communist ruled at the time, came over here, did this river running rampage for 2 years throughout Central America and South America, culminating with Colca Canyon. And during that time, they did 23 first descents on some rivers that are classics now, like the Quijos in Ecuador, the Santa Maria in Mexico, the Pacuari in Costa Rica, and Colca. But the top 15 miles of Colca had never been done. So they did like 90 miles from where you hiked in and down. They put in where you hiked in. And so Jurek's taken me kind of around the world. He likes me. He likes the press, and so I've joined him on a couple of trips around the world. He's taken me to Poland. I did one in Peru with him. But then I hadn't heard from him for a couple of years, and he's like, I heard the phone rings. He's like, Eugene, it's me, Jurek. And I can tell it's Jurek from his accent. And he's like, we have a trip. We want you to go to Upper Colca Canyon with us. The Cruz del Condor section has never been run. You must come with us, And so he sent me some pictures of it, and they were just going to do a canyoneering trip, because it's too steep. It drops 2,800 vertical in about 15 miles. So it's too steep to paddle. But he sent me these pictures, and so I said, well, shit, I was like, I'd rather be in my kayak down there than like walking along the side. So I arranged to ship a kayak down there and a couple of pack rafts. Pack rafts had just come out. But this was 2008 during the Olympics, the Beijing Olympics. And then I got a call from NBC to go work for the Olympics in Beijing to go help the paddling events. So I called, and I was weighing the two. And so I called Jurek back. I'm like, hey, Jurek, I don't think I can go. I got this chance. I'm going to go to the Olympics instead. Sorry, buddy. Good luck down there. And then the phone rings like 2-3 weeks later. He's like, Eugene, it's me, Jurek. We figured out trip. We pushed trip back for you. You go to Beijing, but you fly straight from Beijing to Peru, but you must sleep on the plane. So then I go we have 2 young girls at the time, and I go try to tell my wife about that. I was like, hey, honey, now Jurek wants me to go with him. Are you okay with that? And so bless her heart, she was like, okay, you can do it. So I was gone in Beijing for like 5 or 6 weeks, which was a great experience. When Phelps won all his golds, and I was helping the paddling events there. And then I was there for 5.5 weeks. Then it was the wackoest put-in I've ever done in my life. I flew straight from Beijing to San Fran to LA to Lima to Arequipa, all in one fell swoop, where some guy met me at 5 a.m. in a truck, threw my stuff in the back of the truck, drove over the Altiplano, which is like 15,000 feet, to the edge of this cliff where ropes are set up for this 300-foot rappel down to the canyon bottom, where these guys had been for 4 days shuttling food and all that. And then I literally get off this rappel, land right next to my kayak that had been shipped down there, and then put in on this first descent down Colca Canyon. Changed straight from my Beijing clothes up top at the top of this thing into my spray skirt. And I went from Chinese to English to Spanish to Polish all in one, because all these guys are Poles and only one of them really spoke.
Yeah.
Umpteen, degrees of latitude and longitude. And then we put in, and then my role is to be out in front in my kayak and kind of yell back to tell these guys where to set up rappels if we needed to, because they're just climbing behind me sort of. And then we run into this, I see these 3 people hiking upstream kind of our way, big backpacks, wetsuits, climbing racks. I'm like, who the heck are these guys? I hear them say something similar accent, and they pass us on the other side of the river. And that night I asked Jurek, we're camping. I'm like, Jurek, who the hell are these guys? You normally don't see that on a first descent.
Yeah.
He's like, Eugene, I'm so angry at these boys. There's this group that put them before us. We talked to them about doing a trip together, but they go before us. What can we do? We can't catch them. He goes, we can't kill them. We must catch them. So he literally said that. So it turns out this was a team that was funded by Jurek's arch nemesis from their first trip down Colca, way back when.
Yeah.
This other guy, Piotr Chemalinsky. And like neither one of them credited each other enough after their expedition, and they had a falling out, and they kind of became adversaries. So now I'm in this Polish race to the bottom of the earth, trying to catch this other team. So that's kind of the genesis of that whole book in a nutshell. I won't spoil it for you guys, let you know what happened or anything. But as you say about trying to get through rough times, the other one was that trip in Russia, which we were on with a group of Latvians down the Bashkaus River, which is this 27 days down this class 5 thing, like you said, on homemade equipment, rafts made of germ warfare suits, life jackets made of soccer balls. And I just somehow find my fate has found myself with these hard-suffering Eastern Europeans, because Poles know how to suffer better than anybody. Latvians do as well. These are just countries that have been oppressed for a millennium, against opposing forces. And we're pretty soft as Americans. You realize that.
Yeah.
And I mean, compared to these guys. So, and there's actually a documentary that came out on the Polish guys' expedition. Just came out like a year ago, and it won like second place at the Banff Film Fest. It's called Godspeed Los Polacos. So look it up. It's streaming on Netflix and a couple other things. If you guys are looking for a pretty cool documentary on river running, but also beyond that, breaching the cultural barriers of communist-occupied Poland, and martial law was declared as soon as they got done, and they couldn't go back to their native Poland. It's a really good story.
Yeah.
Godspeed Los Polacos. So I touch upon that a little bit in there as well.
Right on. And of course, you've done some amazing international journeys and adventures, but there's no shortage of things to do here in the Yampa Valley either. And, we actually did a podcast interview a few weeks ago with Bud Whitehead of the Hot Air Balloon Company, who did one of the most only in steamboat things, dropping a couple guys on Sleeping Giant by balloon. You have your own stories that every once in a while I'll see pictures of you and like, only in Steamboat is someone going to hike up to Gilpin Lake with hockey equipment and find the perfect conditions up there to skate. So, as much as you've done some of these international trips and great adventures, what is it, here that you love to find?
I don't know. It's, I've always been kind of a dork about that stuff. I'm not afraid to admit it. Like dorky lines, we'll go ski stupid little hills, that set of 8 turns where everybody can see them above McDonald's or something. Or there's, and COVID really opened people's eyes to that as well. You're kind of stuck closer to home, and no one is really traveling. And we went down and did the White River then, which is this beautiful canyon. It's only 2.5 hours away drive, right? But you take a left at Dinosaur, and it's down by Rangeley, and you put on this river, and you're like, oh my God, how long has this been here? Only like 500 million years. Yeah. But it's this beautiful class 1-2 river, 45 miles wilderness, no permit. Stuff we discovered during COVID. And I've done, there was one, I don't know what got into me a couple of years ago. I got into running culverts. So I was like, there's all these culverts around town that, I don't think anyone else has run. You got the one from the hot springs on Spring Creek that dumps into the river. You got the one that goes by Space Station Gas and daylights by the Commons, right there under 40. Yeah. So, there's one year where I probably did like 7 or 8 culverts in town that, they're just...
Don't try this at home.
Kids, don't try this at home.
And remind me if I'm correct, do I remember you skied the Yampa River?
I cross-country'd up it once. I for some reason...
Again, only in Steamboat.
Yeah. And I tell you, one thing I did that was pretty wild was... I like going crust skate skiing in the spring. When the freeze-thaw cycle comes, you can go up on rabbit ears on your skate skis and just go anywhere you want. Yeah. It's amazing. The most unsung fun sport that no people that...
I like doing that with my fat bike. You can just
exactly.
go anywhere.
With fat biking. Yeah. And I know some crews from Brock's shop, man, they went down, they fat biked all the way down North Fork of Fish Creek once. Shuttled up and then just came down. It's like a giant half pipe the whole way down. Yeah. And you have until the magic hour, like 10 a.m., and then it turns to glop and you're just hosed.
Yeah.
But so I was doing that once up on Rabbit Ears, and I'm skate skiing way out there, probably a couple miles in. And then I just saw this creek bubbling up through the snowfield coming up, and it ended up being, Upper Muddy Creek. So it kind of flows that way. But then it just cut through the ice in this perfect little meander flow. I was like, oh my God, you could kayak that thing. And so I figured out a way to grab my ski sled and rig the poles and to my kayaks, and then I skied in with my kayak behind me, for a couple miles, got to this thing, stuffed the skis down my life jacket because I had to have them at the end to ski back. And then, the kayak was my toboggan, so it carried my all that stuff I needed. And then I got up there, kayaked this thing for a mile or two, and then skied back. So stupid stuff like that, like kids don't try that at home. But there's a lot, like you had said, you just open your eyes and your creativity. There's a lot of stuff, and there's all sorts of people here are doing that stuff.
Yeah.
They're doing multi-sports. They're going and climbing Cougar Cracks up Seat House and then kayaking down to Glen Eden Resort, or and bikers. And there are so many great athletes in this town, as we all know. And that every time you go biking with them or something and you're off the back and you're like, oh my God, there's just hard guys left and right here. Whether they're climbers, whether they're bikers, whether they're boaters, whether they're skiers, fly fishers, everything. It's, and kind of alludes. So one other thing, I started this magazine called Swillin' and Chillin' a few years ago, right after COVID. I was like, all right, I think this town could use something. Just comes out twice a year. It's kind of lighthearted look at things. I wrote a letter. I think the letter from the editor I wrote this summer was Steamboat, pretty good everything. And because when you think about it, it's, and I don't know if the chamber would ever hang its marketing hat on that, but I think they should, because, and that's like only if you're a snob, right? But, by what I mean by that is like, it's skiing isn't Snowbird or Jackson. We can probably all admit that. It's kayaking isn't quite Salida. It's fly fishing probably isn't quite Bozeman. It's mountain biking might not be Crescent Butte, although you could say that it is now because that's come a long ways. But it has pretty good everything.
Yeah.
That you can do all at your lunch break. So you could go look and find better things for each one of them. And it's hockey. Hockey is pretty good and close. It's like
and I would say, just as somebody who is not even, I'm amateur at best at all those things, but it's enough to keep me entertained and get that adventure itch scratched once in a while. I don't need everything to be the best of the best, the most extreme. I just want to continue to have fun every season, every year, and just continue to do exactly what you're doing. Things like just making up funny little challenges or explorations and enjoying it. And I think in that sense, you're right. Steamboat has all of those things. And when you really factor in the combination of those activities, then what does really
then it
compare?
has the best of everything. When you factor them all in.
And I think too, you just said you're kind of an amateur at all those things, but you can still get out and do them, and there's people that will help you to do them and get better at them, because the community here is not snobby in the sense of, oh, you're not good enough to go fly fishing or rafting. Everyone's like, yeah, come on, let's teach you. You've never done it before? Come on, we'll get you out there and we'll get you involved in it. And, I think that helps everyone be pretty good at everything as well.
And oh, by the way, you can do it from your doorstep. Literally, you don't have to go anywhere else.
No, and that's the key to Steamboat, I think. Steamboat really hangs its hat on that, is you can do it all at your lunch break. Every one of those sports we just labeled off, you can ski it for a lunch break on your hour, whether it's backcountry, skate, cross country, or on the mountain, or snowboarding. You can kayak on your lunch hour. You can fly fish on your lunch hour. You can go up Emerald on your mountain bike. And I remember the first time I was living in Telluride at the time, and I'd always heard about Bozeman. And nothing against Bozeman, great town and all, but I just thought it was going to be this utopia. And I drove in there, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's just ranch land, and you have to drive, 20 minutes to get anywhere there to do anything. And Steamboat, you have that all right here, and when it's hard to live in a town like this. You got to work, you got to hustle, you're raising kids, you're volunteering hopefully out there for stuff, and giving your time. And so time is precious, right? So you only have, as you guys know with kids, your windows are short, right? So hour and 17-minute window, boom, you're going for a bike ride, you're going kayaking, you're going fly fishing, you're playing out, you're doing whatever,
Well, and I think to that end too, you wrote an article back in 2019. It was the 40 things a Steamboat local should know, and it's things like how to get to King Solomon or how to pitch a tent. Which, ironically, actually in that article, they used a 10-year-old picture of me pitching a tent to show that case.
How not to? Or?
No, I was at a Big Agnes event, and like I was invited to come along, and someone took a picture of me, and 10 years later it ends up in the paper. But I think what I find interesting about that was 2019, and obviously a lot of this town has changed since you first arrived here in the early 90s, but it seems like there's been exponential change since 2019. And I'm wondering if there's anything that you would add to that list now to say what you really need to know or be or do as a Steamboat local now.
I would say one thing, is give back to the community, because that's what makes it so special. You have people here volunteering for nonprofits, and there's been studies, Steamboat ranks pretty high in terms of its philanthropic giving every year. And you got a lot of people that just want to make our community and the world a better place. So some tragedy happens to someone, there's people here that got your back, that are putting together fundraisers for you or helping out or bringing you dinners. Knock on wood, we went through that 2 years. And it really struck home for me 2 years ago when, my daughter, Brooke, was in a very bad car accident in New Zealand with her boyfriend. This guy named Nick Simon, who grew up here, big mountain skier, surfer, great guy. He ended up passing away. And, he was just the pillar of his friend group here. And the town just bounded together to get behind his family, to get behind my daughter, Brooke, who was, suffering and coming back from it. They all pitched in, and raised banjo bucks and got her a golden retriever puppy to help, and then we started this foundation, an endowment fund at Yampa Valley Community Foundation called the Nick Wood Foundation that, it sponsors, it gives back to 3 tiers that were close to Nick's hearts. Getting kids outside, preserving the environment, and culture and the arts. So those awards money out, kind of like the Yampa River Fund. I'm helping out those guys a little bit now as well. So it's a similar endowment fund, but it just goes to show how, giving the people here are and the people you want to be like should be. So anyone else who's moving here and coming here and thinking, you got a free ride, and you got to give back. Everyone's got to kick in. Be nice to each other. Don't bring like your aggro driving attitude and stuff. Sure, we got traffic lights, don't complain about the traffic it's a small town and it's a beautiful town. And I think the more you live here, the more you realize that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you're helping to continue to tell that story with Swillin' and Chillin'. And I don't know, do you have any other plans in the future as far as books or anything else that we should be on the lookout for?
Funny you say that. I've been working on another book, and who knows this will be my last one or not, because books are definitely, they're a pain in the ass. They're hard, and it's kind of a labor of love. It's not like you're getting rich off them or anything like that. They're a lot of work, but I'm working on one right now. Hopefully it's going to come out next summer. I've been pecking away at it for 3 or 4 years, but just in your free time, right? And since I kind of write and edit as my day job anyways, the last thing you want to do is go do that in your free time, right?
Yeah.
It'd be one thing if I was a bricklayer or something, but it's tentatively called Yampa Yearnings, and it's kind of a tribute to the Yampa River. And through my experience, how I got a lot of stuff we've talked about today, like how I ended up here, how important it is. The reason I even came up with the idea is that there's this author, David James Duncan, and he wrote The River Why, Brothers Karamazov, and he wrote a book, My Life is Told Through Water. It's about him growing up on these trout streams of Montana and Oregon and the plight they're facing from mining and salmon depletion and stuff, and and getting people to care about their own waterways back where they live. And he's way out of my league as a writer, but I was like, damn, I could probably do that for the Yampa. I've lived here for 30 years now. It's a waterway in our backyard, last remaining free-flowing tributary to the Colorado system. In today's era of droughts and mega droughts and climate change and how important that is, and all the water issues the Colorado Basin, which the Yampa supports, is facing. So that gave me the impetus for the idea. And so I've been plugging away at it for 3 or 4 years now, finally getting to a point where, hopefully it'll come out next summer. I'm pretty psyched about that one.
Nice. Well, thank you very much for spending some time with us here. It's been great to talk to you, hear your stories, and your outlook on Steamboat and life in general. Eugene Buchanan, just another one of the common folk in the boat.